Welcome to this deep dive made just for you, all about the science of influence. We've got some great material to work with today.
Yeah, looks like it.
3 audio lectures on how context shapes influence, practicing impression management, and selling and being sold. Plus, some fascinating excerpts from a lecture on delivering effective speeches.
Wow, this is going to be fascinating.
Mmm.
Uncovering those hidden levers of persuasion.
Exactly, those hidden levers that affect us every day, from our everyday conversations
Yeah.
to like our big decisions. And we're not just talking about the latest marketing tricks, right?
Right.
We're going all the way back to Aristotle and Dale Carnegie
Oh, wow.
to see how those timeless principles still work today.
Mm,
What I thought was interesting is that the first lecture just dives right in
okay.
to how context shapes our choices. And it starts with this crazy example
Okay.
of John Travolta's white polyester suit
Oh, yeah.
from Saturday Night Fever, selling for a mind-blowing $145,000 at auction.
It's a perfect example of how scarcity can totally warp our sense of value. When something's rare or limited, we automatically think it must be more desirable.
Right.
Even if it's something, well, let's just say,
Yeah.
not everyone would consider a prized possession.
It's like our brains shut off
Yeah.
and we go into must-have mode, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
This reminds me of Black Friday sales.
Oh, yeah.
Like people fight
Right.
over those limited quantity deals, even if those same items were practically the same price a few days earlier.
You've hit on a key insight there. Scarcity doesn't just apply to material things either.
Right.
The lecture mentioned the Vatican banning Sister Margaret A. Farley's book.
Oh, wow.
And guess what? It became a bestseller.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
But how does scarcity relate to something like, say, political revolutions?
Well, the lecture touches on this theory called the J-curve theory of revolution.
Okay.
It suggests that people are more likely to revolt, not when they're completely oppressed,
Yeah.
but when their freedoms are taken away after a period of relative liberalization.
Oh, interesting.
They've tasted freedom, so it's scarcity.
Right.
Becomes a powerful motivator for change.
Wow, that's a really interesting connection. Okay, so we've talked about scarcity. What about authority?
Okay?
I know the lecture spends quite a bit of time on the Milgram experiment.
Rightly so. It's a chilling demonstration of how powerful authority can be.
Mm.
The study found that over 65% of participants were willing to administer what they believed were potentially fatal electric shocks, simply because the experimenter told them to.
That's a disturbingly high number. And what really struck me was that even when the experiment was replicated in 2009, the obedience rates were still incredibly high.
Yeah.
Makes you think about how susceptible we are to following orders, even when we know something is wrong.
It really does. It shows us how susceptible we are to authority, even when it conflicts with our own values.
Right.
And that's where critical thinking comes in.
Mm.
The lecture suggests using something called the newspaper test
Okay.
as a way to assess personal responsibility before blindly obeying. Imagine your action being on the front page of the newspaper.
Yeah,
Would you be comfortable with that?
that's a great strategy for checking yourself.
Yeah.
Before potentially making a bad decision. And it ties in perfectly with the lecture's discussion of how authority can be misused.
Right.
Like, for instance, a manager pressuring an employee
Right.
into doing something unethical.
Exactly.
So we've got scarcity, authority. What about social proof?
Ah, yes. The power of the crowd. The lecture uses Milgram's street experiment as an example.
Okay.
He had groups of people just standing on the street, looking up at nothing. And within minutes, crowds gather around them, also looking up simply because others were doing it.
It sounds silly, but we all do it, right? We choose the busy restaurant.
Right.
We assume the best-selling book is worth reading. We follow the crowd
Okay.
when everyone's rushing for the exit.
Exactly. And this herd mentality, so to speak,
Yeah.
can have serious consequences.
Right.
The lecture brings up the bystander effect,
Yes.
where individuals are less likely to help someone in need when other people are present. They even mention the tragic murder of Kitty Genovese.
Oh, right.
Despite numerous witnesses, no one intervened.
It's heartbreaking, and it's a stark reminder of how social proof can lead to a diffusion of responsibility.
Yeah.
Everyone assumes someone else will take action, so no one does.
Right. But the lecture also offers a way to break this deadlock. Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book Influence, suggests that in an emergency, you should pick out a specific person in the crowd. and give them responsibility.
Okay.
Something like, you in the red shirt, call 911.
Right.
By breaking that anonymity, you compel action.
That's such a practical tip and one I'm definitely going to remember.
Yeah.
It's amazing how these subtle principles can have such a big impact. That's such a practical tip and one I'm definitely going to remember. It's amazing how these subtle principles can have such a big impact. Okay, so we've explored how context shapes our choices. What about how we shape the way others see us? The next lecture, Practicing Impression Management, dives into that, right?
It does. It starts by comparing our personal image to big company brands like Apple or Google.
Okay.
We all have a personal brand, whether we're conscious of it or not.
That's such an interesting concept. I've never thought about myself as a brand before.
The lecture uses the example of Chinese Olympian Lin Ning to illustrate this. He was an incredibly successful gymnast, won multiple gold medals. But he didn't stop there. He leveraged his athletic excellence and positive image to create a hugely successful sportswear company.
So it's not just about being good at something, it's about cultivating an image that resonates with people, right?
Exactly.
Like, think about your own online presence.
Yeah.
What image are you projecting?
Right.
Does it align with your goals?
That's a great question for listeners to consider. The lecture then digs into two main approaches to impression management:
Okay.
self-promotion and ingratiation.
So self-promotion is all about highlighting your skills and accomplishments, basically saying, hey, look how great I am.
Right.
But what about ingratiation? What does that involve?
Ingratiation is more about focusing on the other person, making them feel good about themselves.
Oh.
The lecture cites a study by Judge and Britz that found that focusing on your supervisor's ego was actually more effective for career advancement than emphasizing your own performance.
Wow, that's interesting. So a little strategic flattery can actually get you further than just listing your achievements.
It seems so. And when it comes to job interviews, specific tactics can make a big difference.
Right.
The lecture even mentions a University of Iowa study
Okay.
that found that a firm handshake can significantly improve your chances of getting hired.
I have always heard that first impressions are important, but I didn't realize a handshake could be that powerful.
It's about more than just a physical gesture. A firm handshake conveys confidence and warmth, qualities that people are drawn to. The lecture also highlights research by Ellis that breaks down other effective interview tactics, like expressing agreement with the interviewer's opinions or highlighting your positive qualities. It's all about making the interviewer feel good.
It makes sense. Everyone likes to feel like their opinions are valued. But what about things like apologizing for weaknesses or making excuses for past mistakes?
Interestingly, Ellis's research suggests those kinds of defensive tactics are much less effective.
So it's better to focus on your strengths and what you bring to the table?
It seems authenticity and a positive attitude are key.
And this reminds me of something else the lecture discussed, those impression management profiles, identified by Bellino and Turnley.
Yeah.
They talked about positives, passives, and aggressives.
Yes. They found that people who consistently project competence and warmth, the positives, are the most successful in the long run.
It all ties back to that idea of personal branding, right? Just like Linning, these positives are building a brand based on genuine strengths and likability.
Precisely. They're not just putting on a show, they're embodying the qualities they want to project.
Okay, so we've got personal branding, interview strategies, these impression management profiles. What's the big takeaway from all of this? What's the key to really influencing how others see us?
It boils down to being genuinely competent and caring. These are the qualities that build trust and inspire confidence. People want to work with, follow, and be influenced by those they see as both capable and kind.
So it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. Remember that handshake.
Yeah.
It's not about faking firmness. It's about embodying that confidence. And Lending's success wasn't about pretending to be nice. It was a reflection of his authentic self.
I love that. Being a good person is actually a smart strategy for success. Okay, so we've tackled context and impression management, ready to explore the world of sales. We've got this lecture titled Selling and Being Sold. And to be honest, the title alone makes me feel like I need a survival guide.
It is a jungle out there,
Yeah.
especially in the world of sales. This lecture dives into the strategies used by both buyers and sellers. And you might be surprised how many of these principles apply to your everyday life.
Oh, I have a feeling I'm about to learn a lot from this one. You know, this reminds me of a story. I call it The Tale of Joyce.
Oh, tell me more.
So it's about this incredible salesperson I met at this upscale men's clothing store.
Okay.
Her name was Joyce, and I had never even heard of the store before.
Okay.
I just happened to be in town visiting a friend and stumbled upon it. But let me tell you, Joyce made it an experience I'll never forget.
What was so special about her?
Everything. She was so warm and welcoming from the moment I walked in, but she wasn't pushy at all.
Mm.
She asked me about my day, remembered my name, even though it had been months since I'd been there,
Wow.
and really listened to what I was looking for. It felt like she genuinely cared about finding the perfect clothes for me, not just making a sale.
It sounds like Joyce was a master of building relationships.
She was.
Yeah.
And she always had this genuine smile on her face.
Yeah.
It was contagious. You couldn't help but feel good around her.
Her approach reminds me of the principles outlined by Dale Carnegie
Oh, yeah.
in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Right.
He emphasized the importance of genuine interest,
Hmm.
remembering names, being a good listener, and making people feel important.
That's exactly it. Joyce embodied all of those things. And you know what's funny? The lecture actually mentions a study by Michael Lynn,
Okay.
a hospitality researcher, who found that servers who smiled broadly received a 140% increase in tips.
A smile is a powerful tool.
Wow.
It can trigger a phenomenon called emotional contagion, where our moods actually rub off on others.
Yeah.
A genuine smile can create a more positive interaction, making people more receptive to influence.
It's like that saying, smile and the world smiles with you.
Exactly. But this lecture isn't just about selling.
Right.
It also offers valuable advice for those on the other side of the equation, the buyers.
We've all heard the saying, don't go to the grocery store hungry. But this lecture takes that advice a step further, right?
Right. It suggests that we shouldn't go into any buying situation when we're overly motivated or desperate.
Mm-hmm.
That must-have feeling can cloud our judgment and make us more vulnerable to pressure tactics.
Oh, I've definitely been there.
Yeah.
One time I was exhausted after a long day,
Yeah.
and I ended up buying this ridiculously expensive pen set from this smooth-talking salesman. I didn't even need it.
Wow.
I was just too tired to resist.
It's a classic example of how being in the wrong mindset can lead to bad decisions.
Hmm.
The lecture recommends setting a budget beforehand, doing your research, and even considering all the reasons why you might not want to buy. And if you start to feel pressured, walk away.
Solid advice. And speaking of pressure, the lecture also delves into how sales incentives can influence a salesperson's behavior. For example, at car dealerships,
Yeah.
there are often commissions, contests, and rewards that motivate salespeople to close deals.
And that can sometimes lead to those high-pressure tactics
Right.
we want to avoid. The lecture actually debunks some common car buying myths, like the idea that you'll always get a better deal at the end of the month.
So that's not necessarily true.
Not always.
Hmm.
The best strategy is to research dealer incentives online, using sites like Edmunds or Kelley Blue Book.
Okay.
You might even consider checking out non-commissioned dealerships, which are becoming increasingly popular.
That's good to know. I'll have to keep that in mind the next time I'm car shopping. Okay, one last thing I wanted to touch on from this lecture is the principle of reciprocity.
Yes, the powerful sense of obligation. It's hardwired into our brains.
The lecture highlighted a study where participants were 5 times more likely to comply with a request if they'd previously received a small gift from the person making the request,
Okay.
even just a bottle of water.
It's amazing how a small gesture can trigger such a strong sense of obligation. And salespeople often use this to their advantage, offering freebies or perks to make us feel like we need to reciprocate by buying something.
So how can we resist this subtle form of influence?
The lecture suggests a few strategies.
Mm-hmm.
You can politely refuse gifts if you feel pressured. You can also be aware of the reciprocity effect
Right,
and consciously make decisions based on your actual needs, not a sense of obligation.
right.
And sometimes the best defense is simply being aware of these tactics.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, as they say.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the science of influence,
Yeah.
I'm really struck by how much of it comes down to awareness.
Right.
We need to be aware of the context, the subtle cues that influence our choices, the ways people try to shape our perceptions, and our own susceptibility to these tactics.
I agree. And by understanding these principles, we can become more discerning consumers,
Mhm.
more persuasive communicators, and even more effective leaders.
Because let's face it, influence is everywhere.
Mhm.
It's in our personal relationships, our
Yeah.
workplaces, our political systems, even our internal dialogues.
Yeah.
The key is to use this knowledge ethically and empower ourselves to make informed choices.
I'd encourage you to continue exploring these ideas.
Mhm.
There's so many insightful books and resources available.
Right.
And pay attention to the world around you. Notice when you're being influenced. Analyze why certain people are so persuasive. Think about how you can use this knowledge in a positive way to achieve your own goals.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with me.
Yeah, it's been great.
It's been an eye-opening journey, and I feel much more equipped to navigate the world of influence. And to our listener, we hope you feel the same way. Go out there and put this knowledge to good use.